Part 4, Chapter 34 of Short History of the Christian Church by John Fletcher Hurst. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 34, The Growth of Mary-Worhsip. The establishment of the doctrine of the divinity of Christ reacted in bringing glory to Mary, his mother. When the Synod of Ephesus, in 431, condemned Nestorius for denying that Mary was the mother of God, Theotokos, they were only falling in line with the increasing reverence of the people. When the fathers left the council, they were accompanied through the city with torchlights and incense burning. From that moment, says Steitz, the worship of Mary may be considered as established, and it increased with every century. Justinian prays to her for the restoration of the Roman Empire, and Narses expected that she would tell him the right moment for making an attack. In the Middle Ages this worship became notorious for its fulsomeness. Candles and incense were burned in front of her images, and angel-painted pictures of her were shown. Peter Damiani, 11th century, in his sermons describes her, not as a humble maid, but as a queen endowed with celestial beauty. Poet and artist joined in the enthusiasm of preacher and monk. Her relics and miracles were numberless. The Jesuits helped forward the movement mightily. New female orders sprang up in honor of Mary, and it looked much as if the worship of Mary should supersede entirely the worship of Christ. But there were not lacking those who called a halt. When the canons of Lyons introduced the festival of the Conception of the Immaculate Mary, December 8th, 1139, Bernard of Clairvaux, the greatest saint of his time, inveighed strongly against the innovation. On the same ground, he said, they might appoint festivals for the conception of the mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother of Mary, and so on back to the beginning. Many of the schoolmen were also opposed to the growth of the Mary cultus. This is true of Anselm, Aquinas, and Albertus Magnus. Later, Adam Baillet, 1693, said that it was simply flattery to worship the Virgin, and he called for large modifications in the prevailing customs. Muratori, 1723, admits that the worship of the Virgin may be useful, but he denies its necessity. In 1784 the Emperor Joseph II ordered all the hearts, hands, and feet of gold and silver which had been presented on the altars of Mary as votive offerings removed from the churches. But by a singular coincidence, which shows how close by each other light and darkness may lie, Alfonso de Lignori published at Venice his Le Glorie de Maria, which probably goes further than any other book on the subject in fantastical assertions and visionary fictions." In the 14th century, chiefly through the influence of the subtle doctor, Duns Scotus, the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, that is, that Mary was born without the taint of original sin, was embraced by the Franciscans. The Dominicans, however, with great heat and animosity, opposed them, and the orders often passed the charge of heresy back and forth. The Jesuits, whose disinterested labors and absolute devotion to the Holy See gave them a preponderating influence, lent their persistent and powerful support to the new doctrine, so that in recent times it came to be held universally throughout the Church. On February 2nd, 1849, Pope Pius IX invited the opinion of the Catholic bishops on the subject. He received 600 answers affirming belief in the doctrine. 52 agreed as to the doctrine, but did not think it wise to define it, and only 4 dissented. This showed that the Church was thoroughly impregnated with a cultus which would have been indignantly repudiated by Augustine and the ancient fathers. On December 8th, 1854, in the Church of St. Peter in Rome, in the presence of 200 cardinals, bishops, and other prelates, Pius IX. proclaimed the doctrine to be of faith in these words: "That the most blessed Virgin Mary, in the first moment of her conception, by the special grace and privilege of Almighty God, in virtue of the merits of Christ, was preserved immaculate from all stain of original sin." There is no doubt that Mariology, more than anything else, has checked the progress of the Roman Church in modern times. It was this which played such an important part in keeping Pusey and many other High Churchmen out of that Church. Newman never felt any enthusiasm for this remarkable tendency in modern Romanism, and he tried in every way to minimize its importance. It should be remembered, of course, that, according to Roman Catholic theology, the worship paid to Mary is not divine worship, and that all her powers of intercession are due solely to her unique relation to Jesus Christ. End of chapter 34.